What if the wisest people in history were the ones we called fools? From court jesters to Zen masters, the fool has been a universal figure, a challenger of norms, a speaker of truths, and a symbol of transformation. But why has this archetype persisted across every culture? What does the fool represent that makes them so vital, even in a world that often ridicules them? The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung believed that archetypes, universal symbols shared by humanity, emerge from our collective unconscious. Among them, the fool is perhaps the most surprising. Unlike the hero who seeks victory, or the sage who seeks wisdom, the fool is unafraid to leap into the unknown. They challenge the rigid structures of society with playfulness, humor, and risk, acting as a mirror that reflects both our strengths and flaws. This archetype reminds us of something essential, that life is not just about order, but also about embracing chaos, uncertainty, and the potential for change. Take the medieval court jester. Often dismissed as a mere entertainer, the jester wielded extraordinary power. The ability to criticize the king without fear of punishment. Their humor disarmed the court, allowing them to expose uncomfortable truths that others wouldn't dare speak. A well-placed joke could save lives, redirect decisions, or highlight injustices, but their role wasn't purely functional, it was existential. The jester's very presence served as a reminder that even kings are fallible and that laughter can be a tool for both survival and self-awareness. This function of the fool transcended Europe. In medieval Russia, the Eurodivi, or holy fools, emerged as eccentric figures who rejected societal norms to expose spiritual truths. Dressed in rags and often acting in ways that seemed absurd or even offensive, the Eurodivi challenged hypocrisy with their unpredictable behavior. They disrupted conventions to awaken those around them, forcing people to confront uncomfortable truths about power, morality, and faith. Despite their apparent madness, these figures were revered as spiritual guides, showing that wisdom can come from the most unexpected sources. The fool also appears in spiritual traditions like Zen Buddhism. Here, the concept of Shoshin, or beginner's mind, echoes the fool's openness and curiosity. A beginner's mind approaches life without preconceptions, eager to learn and explore. Like the fool, it embraces uncertainty as an opportunity rather than a threat. Zen masters teach us that wisdom often begins with the humility to say, I don't know. In a world dominated by experts and rigid beliefs, the fool's perspective feels like a revelation. So why has the fool endured across time and culture? Because they embody something universal about the human experience. Life is unpredictable, full of risks and contradictions. The fool teaches us to navigate this uncertainty with humor, courage, and curiosity. They remind us that play isn't frivolous, it's essential. Laughter isn't escapism, it's survival. And vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the foundation of growth. But the fool isn't just a figure of myth or history. They are alive within us, waiting to be embraced. When we take risks, laugh at ourselves, or challenge the status quo, we channel the fool's energy. The question is, are we brave enough to let them guide us? Or are we too afraid of looking foolish to see the wisdom hidden in play? The fool invites us to leap. And as we'll see in the next chapter, they also dare to speak truths no one else will. If the fool has the courage to leap, they also possess the courage to speak. But how does the fool manage to tell truths that others are too afraid to voice? And why is their wisdom often ignored until it's too late? The wise fool is a paradox, dismissed as naive, yet capable of disarming the most powerful authorities with their words. Their courage lies not in force or logic, but in their ability to use humor as a weapon of truth. The fool doesn't demand attention. They earn it through laughter, revealing hard truths in a way that people can't ignore. Consider Socrates, often regarded as the father of Western philosophy. Socrates identified himself as a fool, claiming, I know that I know nothing. This wasn't false humility, but a deliberate strategy. By asking simple, seemingly naive questions, Socrates exposed the arrogance of those who claimed to possess knowledge. His method forced Athenians to confront contradictions in their beliefs, revealing the limits of their wisdom. Yet for all his insights, Socrates was ridiculed and eventually condemned to death. Why? Because the truth, when spoken by a fool, often feels threatening to those who cling to power. His story reminds us that wisdom requires not just intelligence, but the courage to question and the humility to laugh at our own ignorance. This connection between folly and truth-telling is brilliantly captured in Erasmus's In Praise of Folly. Published in 1511, this satirical masterpiece gave voice to folly herself, who humorously critiques society, intellectuals, and even the church. Erasmus knew the risks. His friends warned him that mocking the church could lead to exile or worse. But even religious figures found themselves laughing at the book. Why? Because humor has a unique power to bypass defenses. When people laugh, their guard comes down and the truth slips in unnoticed. The wise fool uses this to their advantage, delivering critiques that might otherwise be rejected outright. Shakespeare too understood the fool's power. In King Lear, the fool is more than comic relief. He's the king's conscience. As Lear descends into madness, the fool delivers biting insights cloaked in riddles and rhymes. His words reveal what Lear's advisors are too afraid to say, that the king's arrogance and poor decisions have led to disaster. But here's the mystery. What did Shakespeare's fool know that Lear didn't? And why did his wisdom go unheeded until it was too late? The fool's absence in the latter half of the play raises questions. Did he disappear because he was silenced, or because his purpose had been fulfilled? The fool's role in King Lear is a reminder that ignoring truth-tellers, no matter how unconventional they appear, can have devastating consequences. This archetype continues to thrive in modern times. Comedians like George Carlin and John Oliver take on the role of truth-tellers, using humor to dissect complex societal issues. Carlin's critiques of consumerism and political corruption didn't just make people laugh, they forced them to think. John Oliver, with his meticulously researched segments, breaks down topics like climate change and corporate greed, blending sharp wit with hard facts. Why does this work? Because laughter disarms resistance. A lecture might be met with skepticism, but a joke, that's harder to dismiss. The wise fool ensures their message is heard, even by those who might otherwise turn away. But the wise fool isn't just a figure in philosophy, literature, or comedy. They challenge us in our everyday lives. How often do we dismiss wisdom because it comes from an unexpected source? How often do we laugh at the fool instead of listening to them? The wise fool reminds us that truth doesn't need to shout. It can laugh. It doesn't need to demand attention. It can slip in quietly, disguised as a joke. If the wise fool speaks truths that challenge us, the fool's journey invites us to confront those truths in our own lives. But what makes the fool's journey so transformative? And why is it so essential for growth? The fool's journey is not about achieving perfection. It's about embracing imperfection. It's the story of stepping into the unknown, risking failure and discovering transformation along the way. In the tarot, the fool is depicted standing on the edge of a cliff, eyes fixed on the sky, a small bundle of belongings slung over their shoulder. A dog tugs at their clothing as if warning of the danger ahead, but the fool doesn't hesitate. They leap. Why? Because they understand that the edge of the cliff isn't a boundary, it's an invitation. The number 0, which represents the fool in the tarot, is a powerful symbol of infinite potential. Unlike other numbers, 0 isn't confined. It's both empty and full, a beginning and an end. The fool embodies this paradox, teaching us that every ending holds the promise of a new beginning. But the journey isn't without risk. The fool knows they will stumble, yet they leap anyway, trusting that every mistake will lead to growth. This archetype is powerfully illustrated in the medieval legend of Parsifal. A young fool driven by curiosity, Parsifal stumbles upon the Grail Castle, where the Fisher King lies wounded, his kingdom barren and lifeless. Parsifal's task seems simple. Ask the king the right question to bring healing, yet bound by his mother's advice to remain silent, Parsifal fails. His silence, intended to protect him, becomes his greatest obstacle. He leaves the castle only to spend decades wandering, learning and growing through hardship. When Parsifal finally returns, he is no longer the naive boy who obeyed without question. He asks the healing question, restores the king, and rejuvenates the land. His story reminds us that transformation doesn't come from avoiding mistakes, it comes from learning to rise after every fall. The fool's journey resonates deeply in Zen Buddhism through the concept of Shoshin, or beginner's mind. This mindset, free from ego and preconceptions, sees challenges as opportunities rather than threats. It encourages us to approach life with curiosity and humility, to embrace uncertainty with open arms. The beginner's mind is not afraid of failure, it welcomes it as a teacher. Like the fool, it understands that true wisdom lies in the willingness to say, "I don't know." Modern parallels to the fool's journey abound. Consider innovators like Steve Jobs. When Jobs envisioned a personal computer that would revolutionize the way people interacted with technology, many dismissed him as unrealistic or even foolish. Yet, his willingness to take risks, to fail and try again, led to groundbreaking innovations that reshaped the modern world. Jobs' story mirrors the fool's journey, a path defined not by certainty but by courage, curiosity, and the willingness to leap into the unknown. But the fool's journey isn't limited to historical figures or fictional characters, it's our story too. Every time we take a risk, embrace change, or try something new, we step into the fool's shoes. Whether it's pursuing a creative passion, starting a new career, or moving to an unfamiliar place, the journey demands courage. It asks us to trust that even if we fall, we can rise again. And as T.S. Eliot wrote, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. The fool teaches us that transformation isn't about reaching a destination, it's about the journey itself. Every mistake, every stumble, and every risk taken is a step toward growth. The question is, are we willing to leap? If the fool's journey reveals personal transformation, their role in society reveals collective truths. But what happens when a society ignores the fool's mirror, refusing to see its own flaws? The fool's role in society is both simple and profound. They challenge norms, expose hypocrisy, and question power. Through humor and absurdity, the fool holds up a mirror to the world, reflecting its contradictions and blind spots. But the truths they reveal are often uncomfortable, so uncomfortable, in fact, that societies sometimes dismiss or even suppress them. This tension is at the heart of the fool's societal role. In medieval Europe, the court jester was more than just an entertainer. They were the only person allowed to mock the king without fear of punishment. Beneath their humor lay sharp critiques of power and privilege. A well-timed joke could highlight injustices, redirect harmful decisions, or diffuse dangerous tensions. But the jester's power wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. Their presence reminded everyone, even the king, of their fallibility. The fool was a safeguard against tyranny, ensuring that no leader became too insulated from the truth. This need for the fool extended beyond the court. The Feast of Fools, celebrated in medieval Europe, turned societal hierarchies upside down for a day. Peasants became kings, clergy were mocked, and sacred rituals were parodied. On the surface, it was chaos, but beneath the revelry lay a profound purpose: to release social tensions, provide an outlet for frustrations, and remind society that even its most sacred structures were human creations, subject to error and critique. Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard captured the fool's paradox in his story of the clown and the fire. A clown runs onto a theatre stage, warning the audience that the building is on fire. But instead of heeding his warning, the audience laughs, assuming it's part of the act. The fire consumes the theatre because the truth delivered by a fool was dismissed as a joke. Kierkegaard's parable reminds us that the fool's greatest challenge is not speaking the truth. It's being taken seriously. Modern fools like George Carlin and John Oliver continue this tradition, using humor to dissect societal issues. Carlin's sharp critiques of consumerism, religion, and politics expose the absurdities of modern life. Oliver's satirical monologues tackle complex topics like healthcare, climate change, and corporate greed, blending humor with meticulous research. Why does this approach work? Because laughter lowers defenses. A lecture might trigger resistance, but a joke invites reflection. The fool's humor ensures their message reaches even those who might otherwise turn away. But the fool doesn't just reveal societal flaws, they challenge us to confront them. Why do we often dismiss truth when it comes from unexpected sources? Why are we so quick to laugh at the fool, but so slow to listen to them? These questions reveal our own discomfort with vulnerability and change. The fool forces us to ask, what truths are we avoiding and at what cost? The fool's mirror shows us not only what is, but what could be. They remind us that no system is beyond critique, no power beyond question, and no tradition beyond change. Ignoring the fool's mirror doesn't just blind us to flaws, it robs us of the chance to grow. Because in the end, the fool's humor isn't just laughter, it's a call to action, a challenge to see the world and ourselves with new eyes. The fool's ability to reveal truth and spark transformation is undeniable. But what happens when their energy turns destructive? The fool's shadow side is a reminder that unchecked folly, like unchecked power, comes with consequences. The fool's spontaneity and risk-taking are gifts, but they can also lead to chaos if not tempered by wisdom. This is the duality of the fool. They are both liberator and disruptor, capable of immense growth but also destruction. When folly is unbalanced, when it becomes reckless or malicious, it casts a long shadow. This duality is encapsulated in the sad clown paradox. Comedians who bring joy to millions often struggle with profound inner turmoil. Robin Williams, whose humor lit up countless lives, is a heartbreaking example. His ability to make others laugh masked his personal pain, reminding us that the fool often pays a heavy price for their role. Research in psychology supports this paradox, showing that humor can be a defense mechanism, a way to cope with inner conflict or trauma. The fool, while making others laugh, may suffer in silence, revealing the hidden cost of their gift. Mythology gives us another lens to explore the fool's shadow. The Norse god Loki is the quintessential trickster, a figure who embodies chaos rather than transformation. Loki's schemes, often humorous at first, spiral into destruction. His actions lead to Ragnarok, the end of the world in Norse mythology. Loki shows us what happens when folly becomes unmoored from purpose. It ceases to be transformative and becomes purely destructive. The distinction between the fool and the trickster is crucial. The fool seeks growth even if they stumble along the way. The trickster thrives on deception and chaos, often at the expense of others. Modern culture provides a stark illustration of this shadow in the Joker. Originally a playful prankster, the Joker has evolved into a symbol of nihilism and anarchy. Films like The Dark Knight and Joker explore how the Joker's descent into chaos stems from alienation and despair. Unlike the fool, who uses humor to heal, the Joker weaponizes it to harm. His story warns us of the dangers of neglecting the vulnerable, of letting pain fester until it transforms into rage. The Joker is not just a villain. He's a reflection of what happens when society ignores its cracks and fails to care for those who fall through them. But the shadow side of the fool isn't confined to mythology or fiction. It's something we all wrestle with. Spontaneity, when unchecked, can become recklessness. Risk-taking can lead to poor decisions if it isn't balanced by reflection. And humor, though a powerful tool, can be a mask that conceals deeper struggles. Nietzsche captured this tension with his famous words: "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." Chaos fuels creativity, but without boundaries it can consume us. Denial is another form of the fool's shadow. When we suppress the fool within us, it doesn't disappear, it festers. The voice of our inner fool might say, "Don't take that risk, don't make a fool of yourself." Over time, this denial can lead to stagnation, jealousy, and resentment. The fool's energy, when unacknowledged, becomes a source of inner conflict rather than growth. Yet even in their shadow, the fool offers lessons. The key is balance. The fool's spontaneity must be guided by the sage's wisdom. The fool leaps, but the sage reflects on where to land. Together they teach us that growth requires both courage and caution. Without the fool, life becomes rigid and stagnant. Without the sage, it becomes chaotic and aimless. The dark side of the fool is a warning, but it's also an invitation to embrace our chaos without being consumed by it, to laugh at our mistakes without letting them define us, and to find the balance between playfulness and responsibility. The fool's shadow reveals the risks of unchecked folly, but their light shows us the potential for transformation. What would happen if we fully embraced the fool's energy in our lives? Could their playfulness and courage unlock a richer, more fulfilling existence? The fool teaches us that life isn't a race to perfection. It's a journey of exploration, mistakes, and growth. But in a world obsessed with efficiency, productivity, and seriousness, we often suppress the fool within us. We fear looking foolish, so we avoid risks. We fear vulnerability, so we avoid connection. And in doing so, we lose something essential: the ability to grow through play, laughter, and experimentation. One way to embrace the fool is by rediscovering play. Studies in positive psychology show that play isn't just for children. It's a vital part of human well-being. Play reduces stress, boosts creativity, and enhances problem-solving skills. Whether it's trying a new hobby, laughing at a silly mistake, or letting ourselves daydream, play reconnects us with the fool's energy. It reminds us that joy and curiosity are not luxuries, they're necessities. Humor is another powerful tool the fool offers. Self-deprecating humor in particular allows us to embrace our imperfections with grace. When we laugh at our mistakes, we disarm fear and self-doubt, creating space for resilience. As the fool demonstrates, laughter isn't just a way to cope, it's a way to thrive. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability underscores this point. Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. The fool embodies this truth, showing us that growth begins when we dare to be seen as imperfect. Risk-taking is another hallmark of the fool's wisdom. While caution has its place, growth often requires stepping outside our comfort zones. The fool reminds us that the greatest rewards often come from the greatest risks. Consider moments in your own life when you took a leap of faith. Perhaps you started a new career, pursued a passion, or built a relationship despite uncertainty. Even if you stumbled, those experiences likely shaped who you are today. The fool teaches us that mistakes are not failures, they're lessons. But the fool's energy must be balanced. This is where the sage archetype complements the fool. The fool leaps, but the sage offers the wisdom to assess the leap. Together, they guide us to embrace risks without recklessness and playfulness without irresponsibility. They teach us that growth is a dance between courage and caution, spontaneity and reflection. Finally, the fool invites us to adopt a beginner's mind. This Zen concept, Shoshin, encourages us to approach life with curiosity and openness. A beginner's mind doesn't fear mistakes, it welcomes them as opportunities to learn. The fool embodies this mindset, reminding us that life is not about mastery, but about exploration. As Jung wrote, the soul demands your folly, not your wisdom. So how can we embrace the fool in our daily lives? Start small. Laugh at your mistakes instead of criticizing yourself. Try something new, even if you're terrible at it. Take a risk that scares you. Above all, let go of the fear of looking foolish. The fool teaches us that growth isn't about getting everything right. It's about showing up, trying, and learning along the way. The fool stands at the edge, inviting us to leap into the unknown. They remind us that life is not a straight path, but a winding journey full of surprises and possibilities. So, what risks are you willing to take? What adventures could unfold if you embraced your inner fool? Perhaps the greatest wisdom lies not in avoiding mistakes, but in learning to laugh at them and finding the courage to leap anyway.